Okay, so welcome everybody to our Easter Sunday gathering. Very impressive you came on such a beautiful day. So thanks for that. The monastics and Story are on retreat this week, so I came down so you have me this Sunday night. As always, feel free to get water, go to the bathroom, stretch, make yourself comfortable. I know some of you have to leave early, that's cool too. So just enjoy. Today's Easter. Sorry you really wanted to give an Easter talk, but since it's retreat you couldn't, so you asked me to give a talk regarding Easter, which was very interesting since I was raised Catholic and attended Mass every Sunday. For a few years was an altar boy, so sort of in my blood, but hadn't studied the Bible or really done much Christian study or practice in the last few years, so sort of coming back to my roots and revisiting it from a different angle, which was really cool in a lot of ways, surprising in a lot of ways. Easter, of course, as I'm sure most of you know, is about the resurrection of Jesus Christ after he was crucified and died, and then placed in a cave, a tomb, and then shortly thereafter his followers found him alive again. And a lot of people focus on the resurrection. It's a very fundamental part of the Catholic creed. In kind of the same way that a lot of people focus on Buddha's enlightenment, it's sort of like the thing that everyone looks at, which I think is really cool. It's really good. It's important. But in rereading the Bible and rereading the stories, what really struck me was how human Christ and his disciples are, how normal they are. All their fears and doubts and worries and foibles and betrayal and denial. And they're not like these superhero, spiritual, perfect people that I think I imagined when I was a child. They're very, very human. And Jesus himself was in his early to mid-30s at this time. And I'm in my early to mid-30s, so that was interesting. And so what actually was really interesting to me was what happened before he got crucified, before he got resurrected, before the trial happened, the week leading up to that. His life leading up to that, I think, has a lot to teach us for our own practice, our own path of how we can live our lives, and not so much fixated on this miraculous resurrection part, which is amazing, but it was preceded by, I think, even more amazing causes. And so it's said that Jesus was baptized by John the Baptist and began his ministry, gathering his disciples, gave very good sermons, like Sermon on the Mount, that's my favorite. And then when John the Baptist was killed, beheaded by the state, Jesus, in order to fulfill his destiny, made his way towards Jerusalem, and as the story says, with full knowledge of what was going to happen. He kind of knew that he was headed towards his death, and yet he went anyway. And I think it's really interesting that there's the Last Supper, where Jesus gathered his disciples, they broke bread, had wine, they had their last meal, Jesus washed their feet. I think Peter apparently initially said, "You're not supposed to wash my feet, don't do that." And then Jesus said, "If you don't let me wash your feet, then you're not a part of this. You're not my follower." I think that's a good teaching. As well said that his last commandment was to love each other. That you're no longer my servants, you're my friends, and when I'm gone, you should love each other just as I've loved you. And that's how we would know that you are followers of Christ, is the love that you show each other. And then he told them that before the next 24 hours, one of you is going to betray me, and one of you is going to disown me 3 times. And this is like his closest group of disciples, like his closer than children or friends or parents in a lot of ways. And he's saying, okay, one of you for money is going to betray me and sell me out to the state, and one of you is going to not acknowledge that, act like you don't know me. Basically, in the worst moment, you're going to act like you don't know me, and that's okay. And I imagine all of them said, no, of course we're not going to do that. That's crazy. Why would you say that? We love you. Which makes me think it's true, because I don't know why you'd write that in a spiritual text. It looks really bad to write that we did that. So it makes me think it's probably true. And then he took 3 of his disciples and went to the garden and had what they call the agony in the garden, which is actually now my favorite part of the whole series of events, where he took 3 of his disciples and he went to the garden to pray or meditate and talk to God, and asked his followers to just keep watch and practice with him while he's talking to God and praying. And I actually printed it out. Oh yeah, so he told his disciples, "My soul is deeply grieved to the point of death. Remain here and keep watch with me." This is basically the night before he's about to get arrested, so he's foreseeing what's going to probably happen, and he's deeply grieved, understandably. And then he prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me." As in, let this event not pass by me. "Yet not as I will, but as you will." And at the same time, your will, not because I'm saying this, but because it's the right thing. And then he went back to the disciples and found them sleeping and said, basically, what the hell? You can't meditate awake for at least 20 minutes. This is, I like to think he's thinking, this is my last day with these 3 guys, and can't you just stay up with me for 1 hour? Not too much to ask. So he said, try again. And then he went back, talked to Jesus, to God, prayed again, and did that 3 times. And finally, the 3rd time when he talked to God, he said, "My Father, if this cannot pass away unless I drink it, your will be done." As in, if this can't happen unless I volunteer myself, then so be it, I will follow you. Which I think is pretty incredible. That I don't know any other story where the hero, the spiritual leader, knows he's about to be crucified, be put to death, where his disciples cannot stay awake, are about to betray him, one of them will disown him, and yet he willingly chooses to do this great sacrifice. That's really huge, and I was really touched reading that. And so there's sort of like this cycle that I think his life and this moment sort of illustrate. That on one hand, and that he continually taught everyone. On one hand, there is this faith that I don't know if this is going to be good for me, if this is going to be pleasant. Sounds like it's going to be very painful, and yet I'm willing, out of faith, to go forward, to do what's right, to do what's needed. A lot of times in our own lives, when we meet a resistance or obstruction, or something's not working right anymore, a lot of us just keep doing the same thing over and over again and don't want to look at the problem. I know personally, I started an IT job when I was in college, and I stayed with that company for 10 years. And in a lot of ways, I'm very grateful for that job, and I still talk to my old boss and good friends, and that job enabled me to do a lot of things I couldn't have done otherwise. But I also knew very early on that this is not a career for me. This is just a stepping stone so that I can do what I'm really supposed to be doing with my life. But it was too hard to give up the money and the freedom and flexibility to have to look for a new career or move to a monastery. It was too daunting. So I stayed at this job and just tried to make it work for so many years. Maybe I'll start a side business, or maybe I'll do grad school at the same time, or something. I'll do something. I'll still keep the benefits of this past thing that's no longer it's kind of rotten now and no longer that good, but gives me some benefit, and try to build the bridge to the future as well. And on one hand, there's the spiritual level of everything that happens is kind of correct, and there's also the practicality of I was just attached and not willing, out of faith, to let go and surrender and let the next thing really happen, even though I didn't know what it was, and that it would probably initially be pretty bad. At least that was my fear. And so there's the faith of actually willing to go into that unknown territory that is different from belief, where a lot of people think belief is like... When I was in grad school, one of my peers talked about faith as a relationship. It's a trustworthy relationship. You build trust, you build a relationship. And so it's not just a matter of, I believe God, so now I go to heaven or something, or my life is perfect or something. But it's this faith that empowers you to do what you don't currently believe you can actually do. That anytime we do anything new, there's some level of faith that I'm going to jump into this void and it's going to work out. It's actually very common now as a teacher when I see people pick up a new technique, meditation technique, or really any technique about anything. There's this initial beginner faith. Okay, this technique's going to work and this is going to do it. And usually we do really well in the beginning, and then they hit some snag, or I hit some snag, and they go, okay, this doesn't work. Turns out this is just trash. I need to find a different technique, or a different teacher, or a different book, or philosophy, or something else. But really what happened was the faith was lacking. That it was working, not working anymore, I lose faith in it. Not really willing to keep going with it. And that's illustrated throughout the tales in the Bible, where Jesus is walking on the water. Everyone is amazed. One of his disciples gets up, starts walking on the water, and then has a moment of doubt and goes right into the water. He says, your faith is weak. Or after Jesus gets resurrected, which surprisingly, or not so surprisingly, the female disciples are the first to see him and believe in his resurrection, and apparently the male disciples are not believing and saying, kind of making stuff up. And then I like that there's right, so Jesus meets some of the other disciples, and then later the disciples go to St. Thomas, or just Thomas at the time, and say, hey, Jesus resurrected, he's around. And Thomas says, what are you talking about? Until I see him with my own two eyes, I don't believe you. And sure enough, Jesus appears later and says, Thomas, here I am. You may inspect my hands and wounds to see it's really me. And then Thomas says, it is you. Great, thank you. It's amazing, you're back. And Jesus says, no, I don't want to butcher it, actually. Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. And so there's sort of, I think, an underlying current of faith that in this sort of postmodern time most of us don't believe in and have a hard time accepting faith as a good thing. But in fact, faith plays a role in all of our lives, all the time. And second piece would be around this surrender, what Shinzen would call equanimity. This willingness to face what's actually happening right now and completely engage fully, letting it in fully, without resisting it. And Jesus provides sort of the most extreme example of this, of accepting his own crucifixion, betrayal of his followers, or some of his followers, and the state punishing him. Which isn't so different from the situation we find ourselves these days. You know, a lot of us, as I did, feel like, and do, if I did what's really good, then I'll lose my job, or my friends won't like me anymore, or the government will come after me. I know I've had these thoughts at least, and in fact the very thoughts of it. If I really got enlightened, they'll probably crucify me like they did Jesus. I remember having a meditation interview with Sori about this a few years back. And so the way that the current world operates is we get enough pleasure and benefit from being numb and comfortable, from not engaging, not living fully, not doing what we know is right. And we're paid handsomely to ignore the problems of the world and let other people pay those costs. And I'm sure all of us have either been in that position of paying that cost or know people who pay the cost so that other people can gain the benefit, not the cost themselves. In a lot of ways, then Jesus was a real social rebel, really calling on people to really engage and not shy away from the fact that there are people suffering and that the kingdom of heaven is right here. Mm-hmm. And what prevents us from being there is from not living fully, from shutting off, from disowning certain people as not part of my tribe, not part of my circle of concern, not part of who I am. Now, of course, all of us have our boundaries and all of us can only do so much. This is not, but often these talks about ethics or virtue or service turn into about a way to self-shame yourself if you're not doing good enough or something. That would just be an internalized version of what I'm talking about right now. But rather the call that this other way does exist and that it takes faith to really believe that's possible and that's good, and that we have role models like Jesus, that it's real. It's not just a fairy tale. And I know when I was growing up and started losing my faith in Catholicism and talking to other friends, we used to say things like, well, you know, if Jesus came down from the heavens right now, kind of like doubting Thomas, then yeah, I'll become a Christian, but I don't see that happening, so why should I believe? Science makes cameras and lights and pianos and all kinds of cool stuff. I can believe in that, but how am I going to believe in Jesus? Which is interesting to me because just last week I was reading the Buddhist canon, and one of the chapters is called The Divine Messengers. And Buddha talks about how someone dies and goes to hell, and the king of hell, or the clerk of hell, or whoever, is talking to this guy and saying, good sir, did you not meet the first messenger, divine messenger, why did you do such bad things in your life? Didn't you meet the first messenger that, was in your life? The guy says, no, I didn't meet any divine messengers. What are you talking about? He says, well, did you ever meet a baby who was just born and peeing over himself and completely in control of his body and senses and helpless and weak? I said, oh yeah, I've met babies, yes. And he says, well, that was your first divine messenger, that you are subject to birth, that you started this way, and yet you completely ignored that. Why did you do that? And he says, it was out of ignorance and negligence, that I didn't pay attention to that. Sorry. And the guy says, well, you can't blame anyone else, that's your fault, you met a baby. That was your first divine messenger, you screwed up, basically. And he says, okay, did you meet the second divine messenger we sent you? And he says, I don't know what you're talking about. I'll give you the baby, but there was no second divine messenger. And he says, well, did you ever meet a sick person? Someone with cancer or in the hospital or on their deathbed? Didn't you meet anyone that was sick? He says, yes, I met someone that was sick. I met many of them. He says, well, did you not realize that you too will get sick, that you're subject to this body that will decay and fall away, and yet still you chose to do things that were evil and not in line with what is good? And he says, okay, you got me. So he says again, this is your fault. You met a sick person. We sent you the second divine messenger. On and on and on and on. He sends him 5 divine messengers, and at least from this particular story and from the Buddhist perspective, each of us kind of knows the truth. Each of us experiences reality, that this body fades away, that the things that we normally think will bring us lasting happiness do not. Christianity emphasized the limited quality a lot, that humans are limited in your powers, you cannot become God. And so, you're a limited being. And in Buddhism, they emphasize the transient and permanent quality of life, which I think is actually very similar, if not the same thing. Everything that you rely on changes, and so what doesn't change? What can you actually rely on? And that these divine messengers of birth, death, sickness, so on, if we actually really pay attention, just like I think all of us probably had this experience, I know I've had it several times in my life, where someone close to me passes away, and suddenly it becomes a real call to action to life and reality. This is what's really important. This is how I'm really going to live. This is what matters. Not money, acquiring a lot of money, or fame, or Facebook number of friends, or something like that. All these other things that I'm like addicted to, but they are not the actual source of happiness or meaning, purpose. And so all of us have those kind of wake-up calls, and in a community like this, we can support each other in those wake-up calls, that those are real, those are important, those are worth pursuing, even if it takes a lot of faith, even though the fear is completely there, I don't know what's going to happen, bad things could happen, the state might not like it, my friends might not like it, bad things could happen, and yet something about it seems true or right, or the right way forward. And so from that perspective, I think the story of Jesus' life, crucifixion, death, and resurrection has a lot to teach about faith, about surrender, and about rebirth. That in the times when things are the most low, the most bleak, seems like we're losing the most, oftentimes are the moments of greatest clarity, greatest insight, greatest revealing. That the areas that we most desperately try to avoid the most are often the very areas that have the biggest treasure, precisely because those are the areas we're never going. And so when we meditate or we go on retreats, we cultivate the intention and willingness and faith and courage to experience fully, to surrender completely, out of faith that all of these spiritual heroes across the ages wouldn't lie to us. Why would Jesus lie when he willingly went to Jerusalem, knowing he's going to be crucified? Why did he do that? I think it's a good call on to ask. If it was just a lie, how did he benefit there? There must have been a reason. And so we can follow that example and take that into our practice, and ultimately know that, as Jesus said to his disciples in the Last Supper, why do we face these scary places that we don't want to face? Why do we practice in this way rather than just watching Netflix and eating bagels? And I think in this, Jesus and Buddhism are both completely aligned, that we do it out of love, out of compassion. And knowing that we have limited lives, knowing that everything that we try to rely on is going to fade away or change, knowing that I don't have godlike powers to live forever or change the world to fit my design, the only thing that's left would be love. Why do anything then? Knowing that I myself can practice and serve other people to become a better person, a more capable person, and then help other people do the same. And as Shinzen says, the more you progress along this path, the more capable you are of helping and serving other people, and it starts becoming like a game, less like a chore or like a duty or a burden, and more of a what could be more joyous and more fun and more exhilarating than helping other people not have to go through needless suffering. It's a great gift that we can give ourselves and give each other. It's practice, and that practice being translated into service. So let's practice. Once again, you can take a moment to find a good posture that works for you. Whether you're grounded into the floor, straightening up and settling in. At least for these next 2 meditation periods, letting go, surrendering the past, letting go of the future, knowing that for at least this amount of time, we're here together in community. And so we give ourselves and each other the gift of practice. So I'll say a few words, but of course, as always, if you have strong momentum in any practice of your own choice, feel free to continue doing that. And if you want to follow along, then feel free to follow along as well. So you can begin by bringing to your mind's eye someone or someones that you love. People you've known in the past or you know now, that you care about, that matter to you. And maybe particularly focusing on their suffering. Where in their life might they be stuck? Might they be hindered? Where it's challenging and difficult for them to be with themselves, or for you to be with them. And for this next meditation period, whether you have one or two or several or none, focus in your minds. Try dedicating this sit to them. I will practice mindfulness. I will practice this path of spirituality and awakening for the sake of serving this person or these people out of love and compassion, out of faith that somehow this practice will translate to me helping all beings. Then you can focus your attention or awareness around your heart area and just notice what it feels like there. Maybe it's moving, maybe it's still, maybe you don't feel much there. All of those are perfectly fine. It's moving your attention to your heart area, trying to get out of our heads and just settle our awareness to whatever we're feeling in our heart area. Whether it's neutral, whether it's warm. If you want, you can use your hand and put it over your heart to sort of give you a boost. And you can continue setting the intention of being with my experience right now, surrendering whatever I'm feeling, to whatever's happening, out of compassion and love, care for this person or people that matter to me, willing to feel whatever's here. With this strong intention of love set, move through the 5 hindrances, cultivate instead the 5 great motivations. Anytime noticing a different desire, a different want coming up for yourself, you can surrender that. I'm feeling hungry, I'm feeling tight, I want to watch Netflix. Whatever's coming up, you just notice that arising and let it go. Anytime you notice hatred, ill will towards others or yourself, to the room or your experience, you can surrender that. And instead cultivate a sense of compassion, acceptance, allowing. This is okay. If you notice any anxiety or remorse, dredging out the past, dredging out the future, you can surrender that. And instead cultivate a sense of faith and trust that I can do this, that I can be with this experience, I can breathe with this experience, and let things be how things will be. If you notice any sleepiness, fatigue, you can instead cultivate a sense of engagement, full participation, energy, being in your experience fully, not shying away, not holding back, but really willing to receive this experience fully, just as Jesus was willing to fully experience bearing his cross. You can fully experience whatever's happening right now, and that full engagement gives us a sense of energy, gives us a sense of power. And then if you notice any doubts or nervousness around, I don't know if I'm doing this right, I don't know if I should do this or this, what should I focus on, what should I do, am I doing this right? Just let that drop. Instead face the real uncertainty, the real not knowing. This moment is fresh and new. This body, this mind, this experience is new. Experiencing it like a newborn child, childlike, awestruck, willingness to face experience as if I've never had this experience before, because I haven't. Then with that sense of engagement and presence and acceptance, choose any focused object you wish. The default I usually recommend is focusing on breath in your whole body, noticing the breath in different parts of your body, spreading it across your body. Just noticing how it changes. And continually cultivating a sense of full engagement, full participation, full relationship with your breath. find yourself getting distracted, you can always go back to the 5 hindrances and check if one or more of these are present, and let them go and cultivate their opposite. Or you can always bring back the intention of why this matters, remembering a loved one, the past or present, and committing your practice, devoting your practice for their sake. As you're focusing on your breath or any focus object you choose, it's a pleasant experience, that's great. Enjoy the experience, soak into it fully. Let this be the bread and the wine of this moment. You can consume and take it in fully, enjoy it, rejoice in that feeling. If it's a challenging experience, you're finding hindrances or distractions, that's okay. Cultivate the sense of faith that this is exactly the work to be done. Surrendering to this experience and letting yourself naturally find a way forward, whether that takes seconds or minutes, lifetimes, willing to just meet it fully. In either case, you're doing the work, just keep going. 5 minutes to stretch or use the bathroom. Once again, we can straighten up and settle in. A lot of times in sort of modern mindfulness practices, we emphasize the deconstructing aspect, developing sensory clarity by deconstructing our experience down to components. There is also another option of actively using your imagination, actively creating to aid you in your practice. So one invitation here could be, imagine yourself as a disciple, an apostle of Jesus. Imagine that you are sitting at the table of the Last Supper. All of us are breaking bread and sharing wine together. What would the quality of presence, love, connection feel like in that moment? You could imagine that Jesus is asking you to join him in the garden in one of his darkest hours, needing support, friendship, asking you to please practice by his side for the next half hour while he has to make one of his most difficult decisions. So it's just an invitation, but you can use your imagination if you wish. As if you're one of the followers of Jesus, present with him on his journey. Particularly I'm stressing the garden experience where he's asking, please share some time supporting him with your practice while he talks to God and makes his choice of what to do next. And again, out of compassion and love and care, choosing to give it your all, doing what you can. Focus on some aspect of your experience. Letting go of what came before, not needing to worry right now what's going to come later. Just choosing a focus object, whether it's your breath, fully creating the imagery of being with Christ in the garden, and just settling into that experience to the best of your ability. If you find yourself distracted or tired, at the very least you can give yourself support that his disciples and followers also had trouble staying awake during that time. And so just re-pledge yourself, setting the intention once again, being of service, joining the practice. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. I'll try again. So for the remainder amount of time, about 15 minutes or so, I invite you to now take Christ's position and explore, is there an area in my life where there's a part of my old self that needs to die, that needs to be surrendered? In the spiritual path, the feedback loop between living a life in integrity, doing what we know is good and not doing what we know is bad, is directly correlated with the insights and the progress we make. And if we're not willing to digest and live according to the insights we're given, then we won't get more divine messengers knocking on our door until we've followed the ones that have already knocked. So using the presence and awareness and concentration we've developed, see in your own life, is there an area that has tension, feels stuck, where I'm doing something that I know is bad and I don't actually want to do? It seems like I can't help myself, or just haven't put in the effort to change that. Or there are good things that I know I can do, that I want to do, that I'm not doing. Maybe it's as simple as calling up a certain person that you've lost touch with. Or maybe it's not calling someone that you know you need some distance from for a while. Maybe it's telling myself I'm going to practice at least 5 minutes every day. Or it's telling myself I'm not going to beat myself up every time not quote unquote productive all the time. Kind of use this question, this inquiry technique, see if there's at least one area, one place where out of faith I need to sacrifice how things have been, either myself or a relationship, something that's been important up to now. And what would it look like in future if I changed that? What's a concrete action I could take the next week? Maybe I'll give up eating meat for the next week. Maybe I'll practice every day for the next week. Maybe I'll go to sleep earlier. Whatever it is. What's a concrete action I can do for at least one time? As you do this contemplation, you can notice what images, sounds, what feeling sense that arises in your experience. And just notice it and let it be. It's okay if it's easy, it's okay if it's hard, it's okay if nothing's coming out. Just asking the question and then seeing, am I willing to make a decision to run an experiment, at least for the next day or the next week, trying this concrete step, and allowing myself to feel however I feel about that. I'm going to keep doing this concrete action, regardless of how I feel. you found one, that's great. And you can commit yourself, willing to sacrifice, let go, surrender, and just get the feedback of the world telling me how this goes. See if you can get to the place just like Peace Pilgrim, where it's going all out. Maybe I like it, maybe I don't like it, but God's will in this case is taking over. If that sense of acceptance and peace is there, you can move back to focusing on a different object. Or if you want, you can continue to choose more, continue the contemplation and continue asking the question if there's other areas you want to commit to. Although I would suggest limiting it to 3 at most. Great. So this is a time for questions or reports or anything at all. I'm sure about tonight or in general. It's very good.
Peter, thank you for your sermon. Yeah, Carolyn and I watched Mary of Magdalene last night, and it was very powerful. And what you described was what was happening. And such a simple message, nothing complicated. So simple that it's hard. Forget about what you want, what your desires are. Don't worry about where you're gonna, about your bank account or even your health. That'll take care of itself. All you need to do is love humanity. Help the person that needs help. That's it, right? That was his message. Love another person in need. Nothing more than that. And that is so hard to do. It is so hard to do because we all have things we want to accomplish. We all have to be protected. We all think we have to be protected. And it's the same as the Dharma, too. It's the same thing. It's just love and compassion. I find Jesus Christ's teachings in the Dharma right on target. Totally 100% aligned. Completely. So it's kind of nice to be reminded of that. There's spiritual principles. Humans have a way of trying to box them in and decorate them up and present them as something different. They're not. They're just spiritual principles. At least that's my take on it. That's what I was hearing from you. So Carolyn and I are going to leave early because it's her birthday and we're celebrating with another couple tonight. So I thought I'd get that out.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a very simple message. Sori always says that he always gives the same talk, which is basically just let go and surrender. And we haven't heard the message yet, so he keeps telling it. It's interesting, being at the monastery, this tension between sort of like me and surrendering kind of comes up. Like people go like, well, isn't it important for me to like have financial stability or have a healthy body, or what about like positive relationships or healing trauma, or all these things always come up, understandably. And the distinction that we use, that I got, I think, from Sorya, is my body using me or am I using my body? And so there's a way in which obviously I want to eat good food and I want to exercise and have a healthy body and mind, but is that activity for the sake of then, so it helps me to love others more and be of more service, or is it some strange compulsion, addiction, underlying belief that I'll have a perfect body at some point and then I'll be happy and good or something? And that comes up with everything, with money, with fame, feeling comfortable. It's not like feeling uncomfortable is necessarily a virtue. It's not necessarily like we should always feel uncomfortable. But is comfort a need or is it a support? And for a lot of us, it's a need, where as soon as I'm uncomfortable, Nothing else matters except my discomfort. And that's an issue. And so I like to think, I do this practice with circling, with interpersonal meditation, and one of my circling teachers talked about desires, and how he said it was, when someone says something like, I hate you, on some level that is true and valid, but it's not including the whole of the experience that's happening. It's a very fixated, small version of my protective, reactive pattern. And that has validity and truth to it, but it's not including everything else. The other person, the fact of my own historic relational history and everything. And so I like to think the more I include everyone and everything, all of experience and all people and all beings, my desires more and more naturally become aligned with the Dharma or truth or love or God's will. But to the degree that I'm contracted, my identity to what extent my identity is including everything determines how true are these desires. Daniel Thorson, who I think all of you know, one of the residents, has a podcast, and he was recently interviewing this guy who talks about how it's kind of a trope that I think we all heard, that all the evil in the world was done with good intentions, and how most of the evil that's done is done by good people who, out of love, doing what they think is right, and might actually be what's right for that, whatever they're identifying, either themselves or their family or their tribe, but is actually universally bad. And when you get everyone doing things that are locally good for themselves or their family, but actually bad for everyone else as a whole, you get the evil we have in the world. So one example would be like, if you had two towns and there's a forest in between these two towns, and one town decides what would be optimal is each town only forests sustainably, only taking as much wood as they need and keeping enough so that the forest is replenished and healthy forever. But then one town decides, well, I could get more profit if I just forest the entire forest, if I take all the trees and lumber, and because I had this thought, the other town's probably going to have this thought, so I should do it first. And at least then my people will succeed. And well, that's just evolution and competitive drive. Someone has to win, someone has to lose, so I'm going to take as much resources as possible so that my family, or my tribe, my country, or my species, or whatever, will at least survive. And too bad that others can't. And so this message of love, and that someone like Jesus or the Buddha exemplified, and my for-all took his last name, title of for-all, would be, to what extent am I including all beings in my decision-making, in my identity, in my desire? And when I'm willing to fully participate in experience and realize I'm already connected with everyone, I like to think in my limited experiences, my desires naturally line up. And I can hold both positions of, I don't want to do this personally, but it's actually what's best for me and the group as a whole. And that wins out of love, rather than even though personally, I'd rather be 60% on retreat right now rather than being burnt. But I do benefit. I really care about everyone here, and it helps Story to be able to teach rather than be here. So overall, happy to do it. But there's definitely a part of me that's like, well, he has to sit right now. So it's a very simple message. Just love and surrender, die, and be reborn. fortunately, we do it in community. So.
First, I just want to thank you for coming down, and I'm sure I can relate with that feeling of, well, I don't know what your feelings are, but everyone's doing something and you're choosing to do a service because you're committed to doing the service, even though everyone else is doing something else. But so I appreciate that you guys are committed to giving us this gift of service every Sunday. It's kind of amazing and beautiful. So, yeah, one of the thing that I resonated with the most, I mean, there's so many good things you said, and that feeling of, like, I think I know a lot of times what right action is for me. I feel like most of the time I'm pretty clear about it. There are those things that aren't clear or need some time to sort of sift out, but honestly, I think the majority of times I know what the right action for me is, and I can remember times in my life when I knew I had to try this the right action, and I just have my picture of my father's face screaming at me, like, why are you doing that? Like, why do that? Like, because it was an insecure thing to do. It was something that was going to put me in a precarious position. But I knew that I had to do that. I knew that I had to do that. And I just had to tolerate his impatience with me. And I can't tell you how many times in my life I have this relationship with my father where he's like, you know, and even with my mother at times, that they're just like horrified by the choices I'm making, because they really want me to be secure materially and happy in the way that they think I'm supposed to be happy. And that feeling of it's like taking a leap off a cliff. Like, I'm terrified to do it myself, and then I have them saying, what are you thinking? What the hell are you doing? Like, and yet doing it anyway, because I knew it was the right thing to do for me. So just that. And I honestly can say, when I look back on all the forks in the road and the decisions I've made, I don't regret that I've made the decisions I've made. I feel like it was for some kind of inner clarity that I knew that I had to do these things. But I could be probably making a whole lot more money. You know, there could be a whole lot more comfort in my life, let's say, although I have a ton of comfort in my life, really. But it was, just taking a choice that I felt important and right. So, anyway, that's what I got.
Sounds like at various points you listened to God's will and surrendered to that and chose the right thing despite all the other pressures telling you otherwise, and you got rewarded appropriately. And as they say, you can't take your riches with you to heaven, so why are we storing those up? That's beautiful. In preparing this talk, I was also reminded of it's interesting because that Jesus Christ, Christianity in general, is so ingrained in Western culture that it's just everywhere. And it's kind of tangential, but I was thinking of like superhero movies, and most movies basically follow the Jesus Christ arc. Well, the hero has a big challenge and basically sacrifices himself, and then somehow turns out he's okay, and everything, it works out better in the end. The Batman movie, the third one, the Superman one where he dies, the Matrix, you know, Harry Potter, you know, just the arc of the story. And one of the things I really appreciate that relates a lot in my experience with the meditation path is that the very moment that seems like it's the worst moment, and this is what should not be happening, and I'm about to lose everything, is usually the turning point where something actually real happens, starts happening. Insight or clarity or energy or something. And as you said, each time it feels like falling. It's not like I read this in a book and then I just follow this recipe and then everything is great. It's more like I'm trying, it's not working. Okay, I just need to let go, but I really don't want to let go. And that's the emptying out of self, where allowing God or good action or Dharma or whatever to actually come through. And so appreciate that you've lived that example for yourself and other people. And it's interesting, I was doing a contemplation exercise at the end too, and I came up with 3, and I was like, oh, I knew these 3, but I've been avoiding them for months. And I was like, okay, so it's great that you have practice in this.
Your talk brings up the point of love and faith. And someone once said, probably more than one person said it, act out of love and have faith in the outcome, because you may act out of love and there's great danger, or you may be blind to the danger, but by acting out of love, if it really comes from deep inside and the action arises from that place, if you block that, you're blocking your faith. I mean, it feels like you need the faith and the love together, because love, you die for love, and it's love is a big word, but God is love. So it's a simplistic approach to everything you're talking about, but it's in the Dharma, it's in Christianity, it's in the superhero, it's everywhere. It's in a child, it's in a dog.
Yeah, we wouldn't need faith if we knew everything, but we're not God, so it turns out we need faith. And my experience is that love is just my limited experience and understanding is that love is everything.
Love is what? Love is unlimited?
Is everything.
It's not limited? I didn't hear the first sentence.
In my limited experience and understanding,
I see.
love is everything, but fear, the contraction, the fear is what gets muddles it. And I think there's maybe one other ingredient of truth, feedback. That might also be important, because I think a lot of times people do loving actions with the intention of love, wanting to do good things, good intentions, but actually might have negative consequences or impact. And it's oftentimes, for me at least, the hardest time to admit that I was wrong. Because I go, well, I really was trying to help. I really care. I did it out of love. It felt like the right thing to do. And it turns out it wasn't. And that learning and feedback, I think, is something that, as far as I know, can only happen in community or relationship. I don't know if it's possible to do it by yourself very effectively. Maybe. I don't know. I haven't thought about it. But it's all about truth and feedback, and again, that sort of letting go and surrendering, that admitting of the way I've been doing things that I thought was right and I was doing out of love, turns out could be updated to be even more skillful. Is challenging, and but ultimately, I think that's what makes sure that we don't just have loving intentions, but ignorant loving intentions have caused a lot of evil in the world as well. So
We have to be friends of the truth as well.
yeah, exactly. So, thank you for bringing up that triumvirate.
Oh, I was just thinking from this sort of discussion of love and faith, it sort of brings together, I think, a lot of what has been said, but it seems to me like, you know, you can kind of die for love in a way, and you can really die because of faith. It's not necessarily for it. You have to love something that you have faith in to really die for it or put yourself into it. But faith is such an interesting thing because it's like so necessary to just basically get along in the world. Like if you have faith in nothing, you just can't do anything at all. Mm-hmm. Or there's no discernment that's possible because you can't take a path long enough to try it and do it. Mm-hmm. And yet, like, faith is also what maintains incredible stupidity and, like, negativity in the world, too. Mm-hmm. I mean, like, if you think about it, all the really, really horrific things people did were out of faith in something, in some consequence, some sort of consequence that they were looking for would happen because of the activity. So it's such a double-edged sword, it seems to me, and it's sort of this whole sense of like discernment that I think we're sort of talking about. That's like the hard part. So I forgot the guy's name, but I bristled a little bit at the idea that this stuff is super simple because, I mean, the concept of love is very simple, but it doesn't mean you know what it means at a given time, or the concept of, or how to do some of these things as a human being to actually navigate through experiences and execute a life path is so fraught with challenging, the challenges. Like I think I feel challenged with discernment in some sense probably 100 or 200 times a day or something, right? To really have some sense of how to, what do I do? And it may be that there are certain paths through love or spirituality that simply don't end, that may be valid spiritually, but simply don't end in survival or end in doing something for the world, and then there are others that do. That might be a possible explanation for certain things. So you can, sit and contemplate and meditate, and if someone feeds you, you live, and if they don't, you die or something. Or you can go and then execute a very complex set of activities to navigate relationships with other people. And I don't know that I have the discernment to say that one is fundamentally a better path to spiritual development. I do know that I'm choosing to not do thing number one. Mm-hmm. But that's all I really feel like I know. I don't know if I know that the other is worse or better. It's just different.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I would say two things. One would be you're still going to die if they feed you. Mm-hmm. So survival might not be all it's cracked up to be. The other is in the morning we chant, so we call them the pure precepts. Very classic Buddhist chant. Basically, it says, don't do what we know is bad, evil. Do what we do know is good, and purify our minds. This is the teaching of the Buddha. And so, not saying don't do any evil things, because maybe there's things that are evil that I don't know are evil yet. And it doesn't mean do all the good things all the time, because maybe I don't know or I can't do good things at a certain time. But to the extent that I do know something is bad, I should be working towards not doing it anymore. That's in line with my spiritual progress. And to the extent that I know something is good, I should at least test it out and try. And like Jeannie and I were talking about, there's an aspect of truth and feedback, of actually finding out when I don't do or do these things, finding out what happens, consequences of those actions, and the willingness to find out I'm wrong, and that I'm probably wrong most of the time, even when I'm doing loving things for the sake of other people. That just happens. And ultimately purifying the mind, to the extent that my mind is purified and I'm not identifying with just my own comfort or needs or my family or my tribe or my species, I think is correlated with how good my discernment will be. It's not perfect, I don't think, but it's definitely correlated, I would say. But you're right, discernment's very hard. And I think it's simple, and it's actually hard in the execution. Very simple message, hard to actually do it. So it goes.
Especially alone.
Especially alone. It's very true.
But when I think about the discernment process, the truth comes by listening to others and being in community and waiting, breathing, meditating, because the answer doesn't come necessarily at what I think is the right time.
Yeah, that's why it's good to have like pure communities like this, because I've found too often people get into sort of megalomaniac situations where they just go, I am correct. Anyway, that's all about a bad things story. Last one.
Yeah, I was just going to share my experience. Well, I really liked the very, very first thing we started with the meditation of dedicating it to loved ones. That was like very emotionally profound for me. And then I just had a really lovely experience with the birds because it's so spring-like today, and I'm starving for the birds, and the little buds are coming out. And I was just, they were my focus point, and it was probably like the most enjoyable, easiest meditation I've ever had. And I have all this like, I usually have these knots in my back, and they just like released. And so I'm just feeling really grateful, and I'm feeling spring, and I just wanted to share.
Great. Well, the Buddha said somewhere, I'm not very good at this, but the Buddha said somewhere, he said something, but I'll say, personally, I will say that joy is a key part of the path. So, if you're experiencing key part of the path, spiritual path. So maybe the Buddha said that too, I'm not sure. But I'm saying that, so if you feel joy, then no problem focusing on joy and letting that be your focus object and become more joyous.